Well, elections are over, and it's now time to move on and look at the impact of the polls and the way forward. Today, we look at the aftermath of the re-election of President Edgar Lungu from a diplomat's perspective. And my guest this evening is Anthony Mukwita, Zambia's Deputy Ambassador to Sweden. Anthony, nice to have you back.
Thank you very much for having
back on the program.
Thank you very much, Grevasio, and thank you, Zambia. Thanks. Nice to be back on the program again.
We're focusing at the just-ended elections, massive turnout, very huge impact in all areas of all sectors of society, the economy, investment, and everything. What would you pick out as the high and low moments of this election?
I think, like you have put it, this election was one of the most interesting elections we had since the return to multi-party politics in 1991. From a diplomatic perspective, what I would say to start with, I think the high turnout of voters was an indication that Zambians have really woken up to patriotism, to citizenship, and to wanting to ensure that they directly participate in the governance of their country. This also translated into, bringing in as many election observers from foreign countries as possible. You know, we had people from the Commonwealth, from the African Union, and several other ones. One of the highest highs, on a lighter note, I think, was the fact that we saw a situation where politics met art. You know, we had musicians compile songs, more than 100 songs, you know, for each of the different various leaders that they were participating in this election. The lowest low, I think, would have been the sporadic and isolated incidents of violence that were reported before the election. But thank God the police and other security services were able to ensure that this did not get perpetuated. We also saw a strengthened message from President-elect Edgar Lungu on each and every trip that he took on his marathon and grueling cross-country tour of the election. He kept on talking about peace. He kept on saying that I want to ensure that there is peace before elections. I want to ensure that there is peace during the elections. And I will also want to ensure that there is peace after the elections. I think that those were the highs, you know, and the lows. In a nutshell.
I'll pick you on 3 points that you've raised. One about the artists, one about violence, and one about the high turnout. What would you attribute the high turnout to? Was it more awareness? Was it just the competition itself? Did the candidates sell themselves to an extent where they made sure everyone was moved to go and vote?
I think the stakes this time around were very high on both sides. On the side of the incumbent President Edgar Lungu, who had been in office for about a year and a half, and on the part of the main opposition leader, in this case, Mr. Hichilema, who has been in opposition for maybe, 4 or 5 elections until the most recent ones. So it was the race to the top, the stakes were high, and the best man had to win. This led to a heightened campaign. We saw cross-country, on both sides of the equation. President Lungu, I think, worked 24/7. We saw him working around the country, opening a project here and re-emphasizing why this time around he should be the man who should be in office on his own terms rather than the man who took over a term that was left by his predecessor. May his soul rest in peace, His Excellency Michael Chilufya-Sata. On the other hand, the opposition, the main opposition leader at that particular moment, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, it also looked pretty tight for him because he had already previously contested the election about 4 times. So it was a make or break. So they both, had to come up with a mix of how they could, heighten attention around themselves. On top of that, there is the aspect of the Electoral Commission of Zambia that also must receive commendation. They worked also, double time. They worked overtime to ensure that they enrolled as many people as possible. We saw a major jump we saw a jump which was almost revolutionary from about 4 million registered voters to about 6.8 million registered voters. In fact, to borrow even President Lungu's words himself, the day before the elections, he said, and I quote, that tomorrow's election will be like a revolution. It will be a revolution for those that have been treating people well, and it will be a revolution for those that have been insulting people. There will be many losers and one winner. In a nutshell, I would just like to say the heightened attention around the whole election with the high stakes made the turnout come up so huge. Not only was the registration high, including on the day of voting, as observed by many monitors. People turned out en masse, and I think it was a plus to democracy for Zambia.
Let's look at the issue of violence, which is a bigger minus on Zambia's democracy. You think this was driven by the high stakes?
I think the high stakes had a lot to do with those sporadic and isolated incidents of violence, which are really a scar on Zambia, which is known within the region and beyond and continentally as the last bastion of peace. This is the sanctuary. This is the serendipity. This is the Shangri-La. This is where people come to when they have problems in several parts of Africa. So to have those incidents of violence, including a death, which we do not even want to talk about, is really, really a wake-up call that the peace that we have cherished for more than 52 years could easily slip away, and the way we have been viewed by the rest of the world as the haven of peace could change just like that. So we have to do a deeper introspection, in my view, from a diplomatic perspective, if we want to keep on selling ourselves as the peaceful destination in Africa. We have to do a deeper introspection and ensure that such incidents of violence do not recur in future elections, no matter how high the political stakes may be. This country has already, carved itself a niche as a peaceful country, as a country where you want to go and invest and rest assured, sleep, like a baby, to use the term loosely, without thinking that there will be an election the very next day.
Do you think this trend is likely to increase or rise as we go on future elections? Because people would definitely want to look back and see how it played out, and probably now arm themselves more?
I like to always say I'm an incurable romantic myself, like to look at the good side of things. And I think what we have seen, this dark cloud, this dark page that opened, I get the feeling that with our conviction, our Christian conviction, especially that of the presidents and the people around him, and that of the church's organizations itself, and including the clarion calls we have kept getting from the international community, I think this page shall not come back. I actually think it could have been worse if the president especially had not consistently and continuously preached that we must be a peaceful country. Yourselves, Zambia National Broadcasting Corporation, the state broadcaster, I think you played a very huge role in ensuring that the nerves were calmed. You had nice, calm, mellow Christian music or uniting music that played throughout the process of anxieties. You had programs that talked about the importance of cherishing our peace and guarding it. So looking forward, I have my doubts about this violence recurring. I have my hopes and aspirations that we shall regain that good name we have gained for a very long time of being a peaceful country and the haven of peace, and a country that one can easily sell to investors abroad as the country where you can invest in peace.
How much damage has this done to the country? You're a diplomat. You probably got phone calls and inquiries from people abroad.
Initially, Brother Grevasio, yes, there was damage. The international media also have a way of hyping things up, especially in a country like Zambia, which has been known to be very peaceful. So if you hear that there has been a fire there or an injury there, it can cause some damage. But let's not cheat ourselves. Investors are people that have a wider knowledge of things, and they have invested in other countries. I spoke to investors. I also spoke to market analysts that came over. I spoke to other diplomats, and they said what they saw in Zambia compared to what they have experienced in other countries during a time like the one that we had was nothing but a drop in the ocean in the scale of saying that there would have been damage. It could have been worse. But, you know, it was still bad because, you know, a loss of a life is a loss of a life. I would like to look more at what they looked at, the way we went through the process, before the process, during the process, after the process, including the time while people were waiting for the inauguration. So there wasn't that much of a damage. Zambia has proved yet again, in my view, that there is no bottom to the well from which it draws its inspiration to be a peaceful country and the best destination on the African continent.
You're a journalist, and you probably understand. Some media, of course, even went on to say the elections were marred by violence. That was the key line in a number of institutions that reported. Do you think this was accurate?
No, I do not think so. And I think that is a claim. You know, it's like he said, she said. What I would like to base my argument on as a diplomat and a person with a media background is the evidence on the ground. We had the largest turnout of election observers in the country this time around. You have had the experience of several elections yourself, Grevasio. We had the African Union, which comprises more than 50 African countries, including our country. We had the Commonwealth countries, which are former protectorates or colonies of the United Kingdom, who were here. We had the SADC community, which is a composition of the more than 15 countries that Zambia belongs to, a population of about 250 million, 300 million people. We had we had the European Union, which is about 27 countries. We had the United States government, the State Department. We had the local churches, the Pentecostals and the Baptists, the Catholics, and everybody. All these organizations looked at the process before the elections, the process during the election, and the process after the declaration of President Edgar Lungu as the president-elect. And they didn't even sit together, but they separately did make a declaration that even though there were minuscule, you know, incidents of violence at the beginning, the process leading to the election, during the election, and the post-election period was peaceful. So that's what I would base my argument on in order to deflate the argument of the other sections of the media that you have mentioned that say that the elections were marred with violence. And having covered elections in other countries and having watched elections in other countries, having watched political instability in other countries, I am sure you will agree with me that we would have come out with marks of, say, 9 out of 10.
Are you speaking as a diplomat?
I am speaking as a diplomat who has seen other places where elections
being diplomatic
have gone
probably on issues that you could probably point out clearly.
I have pointed out clearly in a diplomatic and probably in a plain and blunt way. There is some internationally accepted standards regarding what is a free and fair election. And these are the internationally accepted standards that were used by the African Union. It is the same standards that were used by the European Union. It's the same standards that were used by the SADC observers, the same standards that were used by the Commonwealth observers, the same standards that were used by the United States government and the UK government, and everywhere where they have held and perfected this democratic process called elections. Now, if they say that we met these international standards, I am not the one who is going to debunk that theory. I would simply say that it outweighs what a section of the media would have said without knowing the motivation of the particular media. Like I said last time that we spoke here, that we live in a very beautiful country, a very easy to sell country, a country that normally knows peace and that we do not pat ourselves on the backs too much. We take lots of things for granted. But when we have independent observers saying, we have done well in a particular aspect of our democracy, I think we ought to take that as a plus.
I want you to look at the media. We've spoken about the media beat.
Indeed.
And one of the highlights in some of the reports, the EU and many others that they highlighted, was that the media was polarized, heading towards the polls.
This is a normal thing that usually always does come up before elections. I think if you followed the 2008 elections, 2007, 2008 elections of outgoing American President Barack Obama, you would see that the other guys, the opposition that particular time, were saying the same thing, that the media was polarized towards Barack Obama. If you look at the situation here, it is the same kind of thing. But here is the way I look at it as a former media practitioner and probably taking off the hat of a diplomat, is that you have a situation where you have the incumbent. He's the president. He is in office. He's still executing executive duties, such as opening a project in Kasama, officiating at a state banquet in Lusaka. What happens is you have been to media school and you know that we've got news values. There is what is called prominence, there is what is called proximity, there is what is called extraordinary, and there is what is called, you know, just the importance of a particular story. And when you weigh this against what the argument was, you will find that half the time it's because the president was working probably overtime, you know. So the media also had no choice. If he goes to open a 150 megawatt power plant, thermal power plant in Mamba, ZNBC has no choice but to go and cover that. If he goes to open a medical school, which is opening for the first time at Copperbelt University in Kitwe, ZNBC, Times of Zambia, Daily Mail have no choice. It's prominent. They're going to double the number of nurses that are going to be employed. They're going to reduce load shedding by from 6 hours maybe to 4 hours. So this is what came into play. It obviously could be interpreted by others as polarization.
When you return back to Stockholm, what do you say about Zambia in terms of the just ended election vis-a-vis larger global village? We know that we're having elections in various parts of the world, probably including the United States.
Indeed, indeed. You mentioned the United States. They should be having theirs, I think, in about 80 days. It's a neck-to-neck between former First Lady Hillary Clinton, former Secretary of State, and billionaire businessman Donald Trump. It's an interesting poll there. You saw, I think, in the past weeks, you've been hearing the Trump saying that he thinks the elections have been rigged. Just the same thing as we've been having around here. But the latest polls show that Mrs. Hillary Clinton may sweep the stakes with a landslide. We don't know how that is going to go. But back to Zambia, which is what we talk about when you're out there. We will be saying when we go back to Stockholm that Zambia has shown yet again that, you know, it does not fall very far from the tree of peace, that the peace that it has held closely and guarded jealously since independence in 1964 is the peace that it just demonstrated on the just ended August 11 election that followed the declaration of President Lungu as the president-elect on August 15. And the process of waiting, which in other countries would, you know, just spiral into turmoil, has not been in Zambia. You have seen immense peace. You have seen even those that disagreed to agree during the election process begin to talk to one another. And the message out there is we are a champion in democracy, and that we are the investment destination. We are a place where you can come to and invest, and without fearing that there will be disturbances. That is the message there.
When you look critically at the polls and the outcomes and all the events pre and post the election, what lessons do you think Zambians can learn from 2016 election?
I think there are many lessons, but one of the many lessons, again to borrow from President Edgar Lungu, was the differences in voting in the regions, the differences in the voting patterns in the regions. I think you remember there is a catchphrase he had during his thank you and peace rally 2 days after elections at Woodlands Stadium grounds, where he said extreme bitterness and extreme joy can create quite a fusion, a bad thing. So let us be careful with the way we celebrate the victory, and let us be careful with the way others are treating the laws. Let's find a middle balance. While we are at that, let's look at the fact that this way of voting is worrying. We must go and find out why we got less votes in certain areas and more votes in certain areas in order to come back to what has always been known as one Zambia and one nation. I think you went on to say, hadn't it been for the 255 voters in Dundumwezi, you know, Dundumwezi has become a catchphrase after this election because I think the president's got about
every after each
exactly,
election.
they're getting into the new political dictionary of Zambia. The point I am making is he got such a low margin in Dundumwezi compared to his main rival, Mr. Hichilema, but he was still happy. He said, hadn't it been for those 255 people that voted for me in Dundumwezi, I wouldn't have gotten 1.8 million votes. This may have sounded like a light statement, but when you look at it deeply politically and diplomatically, you find that this is a head of state who is concerned about the polarization that you earlier mentioned, even though you made reference to polarization in the media. But this is polarization, a deeper polarization in the voting pattern, which the head of state was concerned about. And I think these are the deeper lessons, following up to your questions, that we should get. What is this certain party doing wrong that makes it lose votes in this part of the country? And what is this certain party doing right that is making it gain votes in the other part of the country? If we want to keep this country as one Zambia, one nation in unison, what must we do now? This is the new discourse that we should be taking forward in a bid to answer your question.
Is the word tribalism something you would entertain in your vocabulary? Or you would rather use polarization?
I would rather use polarization. It's almost like a four-letter word, Grevasio. Yeah, it's almost like a four-letter word. I would rather use polarization or regionalism, you know, because Zambia has shown for a very long time that they do not care where Grevasio comes from. They do not care what color of necktie, you know, Grevasio decides to wear. What matters to them the most is that the fact that they live in peace and harmony. They are one Zambia, one nation. Like the president says, my tribe is Zambia. And I will go and take development even to the places where I did not get the vote. And I will try and find out more. But looking back at the same polarization, I think we must do a deeper introspection, like I said earlier before, to see whether we can get a middle ground to bring back the country to what it has been in the past.
Two schools of thoughts on this same one. There's an argument that there's nothing like tribalism or polarization, as you call it, or regionalism, but everything about stronghold in an election. Every party is allowed to have a stronghold.
Every party has. Yes. Both here in Zambia, in South Africa, you will hear the South Africans, even though they are losing it now, African National Congress will tell you that Gauteng is a no-go area. You know, Johannesburg is their stronghold, Limpopo is their stronghold, and that kind of thing. In the United States, around early 2000, you remember the infamous and historic fractious race between former Vice President Al Gore and incumbent then George W. Bush Jr. as he was going for his second term, neck to neck in that fight that saw them end up at the Supreme Court. It redefined the whole, you know, history of the politics in the United States, where now they had what they call the red states and the blue states. You know, here you would call it regionalism, and at the moment where we have two very powerful parties, it's the green states, the green provinces, and the red provinces in our case. So yes, each and every party has its strongholds. They have a place where their message, probably where they have a history, where they were founded, you know, where they resonate more than the other place. But in order to govern a country, in order to administer a country, you must seek the power, you must seek the vote of the rest of the country, or most part of the country, in order for you to be the president.
So where do you look at it? It's regionalism, lessons to be learned, violence, anything else?
I think we're going back to regionalism again. Some school of thoughts have maintained that what we need to do going forward in order to unite the country, in order to heal the country, in order to get it to be a one Zambia, one nation, a little bit much more than it probably is now, is to ensure that there is equitable distribution of wealth around all the provinces. But also just to ensure that you have a leadership that gives a national voice, a leadership that encompasses all, a leadership that speaks the one Zambia, one nation word, not a leadership that says, you get me because I am one of you, you know. That encourages the same polarization.
Now, strictly looking at the polls, would you say there were winners and losers?
In the polls, I mean, I think there were winners and losers, but the biggest point, I think, in this last election, there were winners. The winners was Zambia. Apart from President Edgar Lungu getting re-election, beating 8 other candidates, Zambia was the biggest winner in this election. Zambians turned up in huge numbers and showed the world yet again that they can exercise their democratic duty to vote for a leader whom they prefer, a leader who resonates with them in peace and harmony, and move on and wait for a declaration of a winner to be made and wait for an inauguration to come into place, all in peace, something that is very, very unique, uniquely Zambian and absent in many countries. The biggest winner in this poll was yourself, Grevasio, was Mrs. Zulu, was Auntie Agatha on the street, was Joe the plumber, and several other Zambians who decided to protect their God-given and constitutional-given right to rise up and vote and decide to re-elect or to reject another leader peacefully using the ballot and not the bullet. Those are the winners, the Zambians.
Zambia is working towards economic diplomacy, and that's been the theme for probably 3-4 years up to date. How do you interpret the just-ended election to the international community vis-a-vis trade, enhancing investment? Actually, we got the kudos, yes, but we got the bats also.
Of course.
Yes.
You know, like I say all the time, every rose has its thorn, you know, and every night has its day. I think we have a biggest day on this part for us in as far as economic diplomacy enhancement is concerned. We have shown once again that we're a country of laws, not of men. We have shown once again that, for instance, in the leadership of President Lungu, we have a resolute and a tenacious and a resilient and, you know, a patient leader. We have shown that in the election, we can go and make a change for the better, for peace, for stability, and for continuity in order to ensure that there is a fertile ground for investment in peace. We have shown that if investors come to Zambia and invest $1 billion, $2 billion, maybe 5 or 10, their money shall be safe. They will not be ransacked, they will not be looted, they will not be raped, they will not be harassed. We have shown as a nation that there is life and there is business beyond the election day. I think this is the message that we get in terms of enhancing economic diplomacy.
Using your own analysis, would you say there was some investment that could have been withheld before the pause, and people now probably looking forward to seeing whether they can now invest in Zambia?
I couldn't have put it better than you, Grevasio. I couldn't have put it better than you. I do believe the statement that you have made is infallible. I do believe that there is various business in the mining sector, in the agriculture sector, in the energy sector, in the education sector, in various sectors who sat back on the line and, you know, tightened the lock on their purses and their wallets in order to watch the situation. You see, business people are a very funny animal. They don't like to lose. They like to win. The house always must win. So clearly there was some people, there was some business organizations that stood on the fence and waited to see how the election would pan out and waited to see who would come in. Would there be a major policy shift? And the way I know business, having come from a business background, myself from a business analysis background, is business normally likes continuity and stability. For instance, if for the past year and a half they have been dealing with President Edgar Lungu, they would like to see the status quo continue, because A new leadership may mean there may be a major and even drastic policy change in tax reforms, in other rules that govern business. So all those things add up to anxieties, which is why at a certain point you would see the local currency tip up double digit, and the local currency weakening against major convertible currencies such as the US dollars. And the moment, if you saw, when President Edgar Lungu was immediately announced as declared as a winner, duly elected by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, you saw the currency begin to strengthen. It started coming down from 10 to 9.8 to 9.7, and from what we hear from the market analysts, it will continue to get stronger. This is because the confidence is now coming back from the markets. People are looking at it and they're thinking, oh, maybe very soon President Lungu, after inauguration, may be resuming discussions with the International Monetary Fund, the so-called IMF, to see whether a new package for Zambia can come up, I mean, based on a win-win situation. But basically is yes. People held back to their money because they wanted to. It was a wait-and-see situation. But things should be much better now.
So when you speak about a currency strengthening, this is a temporary measure. Temporary measure?
Well,
not permanent?
No, it's going to be
reacting
permanent.
to the outcome of the election.
It's going to be...
getting back to its usual mode, back to its normal past position.
Actually, it should get even better. Because like you had rightly put it, some people had withheld their money. They did not want to bring any more money into the country until they saw which direction things were going. But now that they know that the path to stability and continuity is there, that there's still the same leader they dealt with last year, who they will deal with this year and maybe for the next 5 years, you will see a situation where the currency starts to strengthen, actually, to a level where others will start complaining that it's gained too much and it's bad for exports or bad for imports. So temporarily, now it is tipping to say about 9. But as more money comes in and more packages are agreed upon, we will see it getting, we will see the local currency getting stronger. We will see more jobs being created in the construction sector. We will see more jobs being created in the mining sector. We will see more jobs coming up in the energy sector, because all those that had locked up their money would now be able to say, we have a long-term. Business likes to plan long-term. They don't like to plan 1.5 years. They like to plan 5 years, 10 years. It makes things easy, and it also just makes business sense. So the election, it's been a good thing to come out of it without so much fractiousness. And
did the wait between the announcement of the result and the inauguration also have a role to play, or did it affect the economy?
Yes, anxieties always do affect the economy, because it's a wait-and-see situation all the time. You don't know when you're going to cross the Rubicon. You know you are there, but you don't know you don't know. You want to be sure. Numbers people, business people always want to be absolutely sure. That's why it's always 1 + 1, it's 2. It's not about 2. It's not about 2.5. You know, so they want to make sure that it is sealed, it is in the bag. But during that period of anxieties, there is something that is got to give. And that is what you see, the battering on the economy sometimes and the weakening in the currency. But all these things are normal. It's worse in other countries. And I always say other countries, and people say, why are you mentioning other countries? You are Zambia. But we are not an island. We live in a global village. We live in the SADC region. We live in the Commonwealth village. We live in the African Union village. We live in the global village. And what happens in one part of the world affects the other. And we draw sharp contrasts and lessons from the various countries.
Back in Stockholm, sitting in the office, what are you telling the investor?
I am telling
person who's been wanting to come to Zambia.
I am telling the investor in Stockholm that, you know, you 50 farmers that wanted to go and invest in Zambia, you people that wanted to invest in green energy, you people that wanted to invest in agriculture, this is the time to go to Zambia. You have a resolute leadership, and you have a citizen that plays a very, very pivotal role in the governance of the country, and you have law and order, and you have a recourse to the court and justice system So this is the place to go and invest. You have not only a population of 10, 12 million Zambians, but you have about 300 million people in the Southern African Development Community, to which Zambia belongs, who have incomes of more than $3 billion US. So this is the time. Run to Zambia for stability, continuity, and development. Go and invest in Zambia. That is the message we are taking out there.
9 candidates in one race, and basically reduced to 2.
Indeed.
Fight between 2 front runners and contenders. How did you score it as a diplomat? I'm interested in knowing that.
It's interesting. I don't know whether I should be getting into that, but you've put me on the spot. So what I will just simply say is that I think it was a hot race, and the bookmakers had it all out mostly for the 2 candidates with the largest parties. That was the incumbent President Edgar Chagwa Lungu, and for the main opposition leader who had come out of 4 losses in the past, Mr. Hakainde Hichilema. I think looking at the 2015 race, where President Lungu had fought not only 10 candidates within the party, within his own party, and emerged the winner, and then got out to beat another 10 candidates from the opposition at the main poll in that by-election, I think had given him a notch up, given the fact that this time he was already a winner in his party, the Patriotic Front, and he was only facing the other 8 candidates this time around, and it had given him more time. Last time he was coming in almost as a non-entity, as he said himself several times during the race, that you didn't know me then, now you know me. You didn't see me then, now you have seen me. You didn't know what I had done, now you have done. Looking at the fact that the ruling party, and I say this without any bias, looking at the fact that the ruling party had already a number of projects, because this came down to issues. This election came down to issues. It came down to issues of who has invested in the road construction industry, who has built universities, who is building hospitals, compared to who is promising to do all this. So if you had to ask me to
Did
do
it
a
also
bookmaker,
come down to who has failed to do what?
exactly.
Did you see some anger in some people of something that was not fulfilled?
I saw some anger, I saw some consternation, I saw some anxieties in some people who felt that perhaps the government had not done enough in order to seek re-election. But I also saw some reason in some analysts, and including government officials, that vehemently supported themselves and said it would be unfair to judge Edgar Lungu on 1.5 years in office. It would be expecting too much. Even if you planted a coffee tree today, you do not expect it to bear fruit. The seed, the bean, will come in after 3 years. Even if you have a child, that 1 year is basically not going to go anywhere. So yes, that frustration was there, and it's a normal frustration, but I think that's why democracy is a very great thing. That's why people have to come on the stage like yourself and myself, the way we are seated, and argue their points out on why they have not delivered this particular aspect and why the others feel that they should be the best ones to fix this particular aspect.
Now, I'll still take back to polarization, investment, and you going back home and going back to Stockholm, your base. And when you read the media and when you're looking at Zambia as a country, do you see 2 countries or you see 1 country?
I see one country with a bit of misunderstandings, which I think must be bridged. Like I said, it is the same everywhere in the world. In the United States, I gave you an example. There's the red states and the blue states.
Do you see a country which is embattled, struggling?
I do not see, no, I think, no.
You see a country which is rosy and on its way to development and path of growth?
I see a country which is on its way to take your last one. Your last cue is a better one. I mean, that's what we should have started with compared to the other ones. I see a country that is headed for growth. I see a country that has a uniting and unifying leadership. I see a country that has a ground which is fertile for investment. I see a country that has a people that are more civic aware probably than any other. I see a country that is able to do some deeper introspection in itself And I see a country that is able to say, where did we go wrong? How can we correct the wrongs? Why did we have such a high pattern of voters for this particular candidate in this part of the country and lower for this particular candidate? I see a country which says, let us put aside our political beliefs or disbeliefs. Let us put aside our religious beliefs. Let us put aside our gender beliefs and sit on one table of brotherhood or sisterhood and move in a better and developmental, fashion. That's the kind of country I see.
Is that what other people are seeing? Not Zambians, people sitting out there, never been to Zambia. Is this what they're seeing?
That's what they are
looking
seeing.
at Zambia from your eyes?
They have seen other countries. I don't want to, as a diplomat, I can't mention that that country is bad because there was a war in that country, there was destabilization in that country. Yeah. But when they look at Zambia, comparatively, on a scale of 1 to 10, I think they give it 10, given what has happened during times like the ones that we are having. Other countries do not even go for elections. Mind you, we have gone for about 7 elections since the return to multi-party politics, or rather since independence. And none of them have recorded as much blood as other countries on the continent and beyond have shown. So I think when they do tip the scale, when they look comparatively with other countries, they say that is a country to watch. I think that is one of the main reasons why you see there is a huge concern every time from people, from countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, the EU itself, and the African Union. That is why there is always so much, intense spotlight on Zambia. It's like almost the entire continent, the entire world wants to ensure that this country remains the shining example of peace, stability, and continuity.
Does that explain the high number of observers in this election?
Yes. I think that is one of the reasons why there was a high number of observers in this election. It was almost like a litmus test, because of the hype that was before the elections. So people were wondering. The local media, the international media had also sent out all sorts of fillers. Oh, it's a do or die. It's a make or break for Edgar Lungu. It's a make or break for Hakainde Hichilema. And it's a make or break for this peace haven in Southern Africa. This is the test that shall, make it come out to be what it has been for 50 years, or maybe break it. So everybody wanted to see. And luckily for us, Grevasio, thanks to you, thanks to Mrs. Zulu, and thanks to everybody else, we showed yet again that we can emerge out of a fractious and acrimonious situation and remain one Zambia, one nation.
So how do you explain, I want you to look deeper into the findings or the observers' reports, and how do you explain those reports by the observers?
Which ones?
The relevance of the reports churned out by the observers to your mission as a diplomat, a Zambian diplomat?
The relevance is, instead of myself as a diplomat talking about our country being a law-abiding country, being a peace-loving country, being a stable, loving country, which is biased, because I come from the country, so I say something nice about it. It's about Grevasio Zulu. They ask him, what are your strengths? You say, oh, your strengths. But I probably think you've got weaknesses and other stuff like that. So basically, my report has weaknesses because it's got inner biases. But if I use a barometer used by the African Union, used by the Commonwealth, used by the European Union, used by the SADC observers, I'm standing on much more solid ground. I stand on quicksand when I'm blowing my own trumpet than when I use a premise from international observers that are independent and have no or little interest in our country. That is the importance of those findings, those studies that you have mentioned. They are very good for us. They are a great tool for selling the country.
Do the bats in there affect you negatively?
Not really. There is never a perfect situation. There is never a perfect situation. There will be a few hurdles. There will be a few challenges. But when you cut through the noise, you will find that there has been more silence, actually, than the noise. You will find the people, the organizations that were most critical of the government at the beginning, including the churches and the Western missions in the past. They were the first ones to come up and say President Edgar Lungu has been duly elected. Zambians are a peaceful people. They have demonstrated yet again that they can exercise politics in a mature and democratic manner. This is a budding democracy in the southern region. I think that cuts above the noise of the unfortunate incidents of violence, which inevitably did take place. One good thing that comes out also is the fact that we have seen a leadership that continued to say that, please, do not do violence. Do not do violence. Love one another. Let us go and pray. Let us kneel down and pray to God that this country remains a peaceful country. That was a great thing. It was regrettable that some sections of the opposition thought praying was a waste of time, or thought calling upon the hand of God to guide the leadership was a waste of time. But the majority of Zambia, as you know, we are a Christian nation, I think warmed up to the fact that we needed to continue cherishing this peace. You do not want to see those pictures that you see on CNN, on Fox News, of a 10-year-old in Aleppo who is now being used as the face of Syria, who was pulled out of rubble where his 12-year-old brother died, you know, and stuff like that, to what has happened in Zambia. You know, pulling babies out of the rubble is what Zambia has refused. You know, killing people, shedding blood. You had a president himself who said, we will not allow people to die just because I want to go to State House. No. But then neither will I allow anybody else to kill people just because they want to go to State House. This is a peaceful nation. This is a God-given country. This is the most attractive destination for investment. And we should keep it that way.
There are points where some reports felt that some public institutions didn't perform to expectation. The police, the media.
I'm a bit hesitant to go in detail on that at the expense of showing biases and pointing blame. But I would just like to take you back to the example I gave earlier of the fact that there is values that you use. There is core values that you use. For instance, in news, what judgment do you use to say this is what we are going to play on news? It's the prominence, it's the proximity, and other issues. So as to where whether the police performed as good as they should, the only conclusion I can draw is to the fact that whereas there could have been several people injured, several buildings looted or burnt, and several people dead, if they hadn't taken control. The fact that we did not come to a catastrophic level of damage or loss of life and property, I would say we, on average, did what would internationally be accepted as okay.
Now, I'll put you on the spot as a diplomat and a media analyst. Why do you think Zambians overwhelmingly voted for, in 7 provinces, voted for re-election of President Edgar Lungu?
One of the main reasons, I think, this may seem trivial, Brother Grevasio, but I think it's his connection. President Edgar Lungu had managed to sell himself as a human being, as an ordinary guy that became president, as a person who could talk to you in your own language and dance with you and take off his necktie and say hello to your baby, your child, without having the qualms of being president. Having to put the human part aside, I think he also largely managed to successfully point at the development projects that his party had embarked on in the past 5 years. And these are real. You know, they say seeing is believing, and, you know, faith sometimes has to be tested with some of the things that you can see. So I think this message resonated very well with the voters in the 7 provinces, or more. I don't know why it sort of failed to find middle ground or deeper ground in other parts of Zambia, but I suppose that should be a case study now for political analysts and scientists to go down and find out why did we have this huge acceptance of President Lungu in this large part of Zambia that has the largest number of voters, and why did we have a huge constituency of voters also go for Mr. Hichilema in this part of the country that has less voters than the other one where President Lungu got his thing. So I think he managed to humanize himself much more. I think Zambians want a leader. They like a leader whom they can relate to as an ordinary person, all in all.
I want you to look at the aspect of music. I know you mentioned it and we didn't really go into it deeper.
Yeah.
100 songs, maybe over 100?
Over 100 songs, I think.
What impact does music have on campaigns? Maybe you would want to say something about that.
You know, music is the key. Music is a sort of language that you identify with without even being to a particular language. By the way, it's not only happening here in Zambia. In the United States right now, when Hillary Clinton gets on the stage, she has Beyonce, she has Michael J. Fox, she has all these Hollywood stars such as the George Clooney's and the rest. It's pop culture and politics is coming to meet because it's easier to communicate a certain message sometimes through a song than it is through an explanation and graphs. I mean, take for instance, Dununa Reverse, you know, and Chikonko Mwikate, all these songs that did come up, they did grip people in a different way than a hard political speech would do. That is the
appeal to the emotion of the people? It
appealed to the
message.
emotion.
Well, would you say these songs delivered a message in some,
I think so.
At some point? Or were they just
I think
raising people's emotions and moving them to go and vote? Not really based on facts and issues.
No, they did because, you know, I mean, they did both, actually. They captured the emotions and they captured the facts. For instance, if I give you an example of one of the songs, which is Sonte Powabomba, which means, can you please point on what you have done? Show me your projects. Show me yours, I'll show you mine, that kind of thing. So it's much easier in a song. It resonates and it is emotive more in a song, in my view, than it would be when you start talking about 8,000 kilometers of roads, 650 health posts, when you talk about 150 megawatts, all this stuff is heavier. But when you're talking about Sonta, and then you see a clinic, and you've got a dancing president, it just adds to the flavor, and it lightens the burden of an otherwise very heavy political issue.
So music played a bigger role than many other issues in this election.
I think it did. I think it did. In fact, my challenge to scholars would be, like you have just challenged, is that somebody, it's not me, but somebody must get to do a study on the role, the positive role that the music played, that the artist played in the 2016 election. I think it is something that should make very interesting reading and could add a great deal to our body of knowledge in our literature in this country, going forward in politics. Mark my words, you are never gonna ignore musicians and artists in Zambia again, starting from this election.
I did say at the beginning of the program that the elections were over and it was time to move on. In your last words, I want you to say, how do we move as a nation? How does Zambia move forward after these elections?
I think I will borrow again, Grevasio, thanks. I think that's a very, very pertinent question. I will borrow again from President Edgar Lungu's peace and unity speech at Woodland Stadium, where he said, let us not indulge in extreme happiness. Let us not gloat. Let us not call ourselves, oh, we have winner. Let us also not consume ourselves and get stuck in the moment of depression and hate. Let us find the middle lane, do a deeper introspection, come to the table and move forward as a united country on the same spirit that we have been founded on since 1964 of one Zambia, one nation. This is just an election. President Edgar Lungu has won. He has been declared winner. There will soon to be an inauguration. Let us move on and see how the next 5 years pan out.
Anthony?
Grevasio.
So it's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you very much for the invitation again.
Well, you've been watching Sunday Interview, and our guest this evening was Zambia's Deputy Ambassador to Sweden, Anton Mkwita. Till next week when I'm back with another exciting edition of the program, pleasant viewing.